FOZ podcast. This is episode 155. We'll just get right into the meat of it. Today is Mike's hosting job, and we are going to talk about what, Mike?
Global governance. Just something real simple. You know, I wanted to pick something light after we had all those conspiracy theories.
Birds, they still aren't real.
Birds aren't real.
So not real.
Yep.
Not real.
I mean, there's
Just
all
got the
kinds of
t-shirt.
things. I mean, we've had a very good response to our last episode, so we welcome all of our new viewer to this one. It's a little bit different, but so tonight I've been thinking about this episode for a while, and it's been kind of percolating in the back of my brain. Percolating. But this past weekend I had a bad case of bronchitis that I really didn't get over until like this morning. So I actually feel better now. But
nobody got time for that.
No one has time for that.
I ain't got time to breathe horribly.
It sucks, man. I hate being sick. But I was watching this movie because I couldn't sleep, and I'd never seen it before, called TOPKAPI. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. I think it's from like 1965 or something. And
what's it called?
TOPKAPI, TOPKAPI. It's kind of an international heist film.
Okay.
It's got Melina Mercury in it, and Peter Ustinov and Maximilian Schell.
Okay.
Very good movie. Really a blast. I mean, a lot of fun. Nothing heavy. It's kind of like typical 1960s movie where it's a little zany and weird stuff. Anyway, it has Peter Ustinov in it, and I was like, man, I Googled Peter Ustinov, and when I was reading through stuff, I found out that he was from like 2000, I'm sorry, from like, I think 1990 something until his death. He was the president of the World Federalism movement. And I was like, that's kind of bizarre. This guy spoke like 7 languages. He was an actor. He was kind of a bon vivant. He was always on Carson. I'd seen him on Carson, but he was always doing like the panel shows. He was just a character, you know, of that. If you watch Johnny Carson in the 70s or 80s, you've seen him. And I was like, World Federalism movement, what is that? Right? So I started researching it, and it tied into what I'd been thinking about doing. So I was like, okay, that must be a sign. Let's get into it. So I didn't want to talk about like politics. So we're not talking about, you know, local politics, whatever, anything like that. No personalities, just sort of like philosophical views on things. And it started dawning on me with all these conversations that we've had and just conversations I have with other people, whenever we talk to each other and like different factions in our country that have different views, we're kind of starting at the end of the story instead of the beginning. And that is, what I mean is, what is the common ground? Like, what do we agree on? Do we have the same view of reality? Do we want the same things? And I started thinking, like, if you look at politics and everything that we talk about, it's all about getting society somewhere else, like moving us forward through time. How are we going to manage things? How are we handling new events? How are we dealing with each other? And I started thinking, you know, when we grew up as well, I mean, Desiree, I know you're not Gen Xer, but you know what I'm talking about. This whole like New World Order movement. I mean, it started kind of with George Bush as far as the nomenclature, but the idea of one world government. And, you know, my initial reaction personally is like, screw that, you know? But the more I've been reading about this, one, it's interesting, and two, it really makes, if you have a viewpoint on this subject, it sort of helps you line up everything else down the line, because it shapes like, what is your view, kind of like that episode we did about what you want from government, sort of like, what's the end game here? And there are people in the past, I mean, going back decades, even, you know, hundreds of years, that have had this philosophical discussion, and that is the era of the nation state over, Are we entering a period where, in order to manage everything that's going on our planet, that we need to have centralized, pardon me while I get another drink of water here. Do we need to have a centralized power structure to manage everything? And if so, to what end? And what do you give up for that? What's the cost benefit? What do you get as, what do we get as a society? What do we give up as a society? And I sent you guys the article or the interview with John Vlasto of the World Federalist Movement, who is currently holding Peter Ustinov's old seat because Peter died. So I looked up their website. I looked up their website, and this guy just happens to be, in that position now. And I was like, oh, okay, these are globalists. I want to start playing my ministry albums. Screw this new world order stuff. But they bring up a lot of interesting points. And, it's one thing just to dismiss it, but I think it's a interesting thing to think about and talk about. Generally, from what I can gather, their philosophy, and again, there's a lot of groups like this, is that the issues that we're dealing with as human beings aren't about like when the bison are coming through on their next migration. It's interplanetary travel, asteroids coming, solar flares, global communications. And can those things be managed by nation states who make decisions based on their own self-interest?
I feel like Mike's
versus
going to go into the speech at the end of Independence Day.
no, I'm not, versus the interest of us all. So anyway, I just started reading up on this stuff, and I'm not going to hit you with all kinds of info. It's more of just a conversation of like, how do you guys, what's your gut feeling telling you, And so let me jump to the slideshow, just a quick introduction here and see if I can. Okay, you guys see this?
Yep.
You see George?
Yep.
George H.W. So I actually was watching this speech, of course, when he gave it, and I remember the line, and at the time, contemporaneously, the whole phrase "New World Order," like for a lot of people, especially of our age, it kind of sent some shivers. It seemed like a very authoritarian thing to say, and it was it was not a concept that me personally that I've ever really considered. Up here we've got Churchill and Roosevelt and Stalin. After World War II, the Allies, we won the day, and we became, as a allyship, at least for a short amount of time, the rulers of the planet, in all intents and purposes, until NATO was formed to combat the Soviet Union and things like that. But it really reconfigured how everything was done. And then within our lifetime, the Berlin Wall falling, the Soviet Union falling, it was another breath, another period of time where the whole apple cart got upset, and we've talked about that on other episodes. Was that a missed opportunity? But these things are going to happen again. In other words, the order that we take for granted, whatever it is, no matter how chaotic you think it is, it's going to be upended. It's been upended like every generation or two for time immemorial. So I just wanted to think and have a conversation with you guys about this. So how do I get to the next? How do I do this?
Spacebar.
There we go. So the United States, and not just the United States, other countries have used this form of government. But when we talk about federalism, as in the World Federalism movement, that's our form of government. And basically what it is it's a combination of local governments and a more general overriding government. For the United States, it's the country of the United States is the federal government, the more general government. And then the states, are the regional. And then even within states, we have federalism, we have cities and towns, and so far down the line. So as a citizen, you have control over each incarnation of government as it gets more and more generalized. You can vote in your town, your city, your state, and for general federal elections. And the whole idea of it is to divide power up as much as possible to those authorities that are best suited to deal with whatever issues. So getting your kids to school on time with the bus routes. Probably don't need the federal government for that. Probably should have your town government do it. Or maybe your state government if you don't have a big population. Whatever. You guys know all about that stuff. I thought this picture was interesting. It was only the second Earthrise picture taken. You guys are familiar with the first one. But this one, I just like that it's kind of screwed up.
It's fake.
I don't see any stars in the background. That's fake.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
it's
that's one.
yeah, Stanley Kubrick took this photograph. So
I thought we were done with conspiracies.
I know. So again, the concept of federalism has been around a long time. I mean, well before the United States. And you can go back and there's different examples of it. Some going back, I didn't even write this down, but even back to 700 BC, I did write it down, in Greece and Peloponnesia. But I looked at this situation as far as modern day federalism, 13th century Switzerland. These are all towns, cities like Zurich, Bern, some of these other places in South Central Europe. They kind of formed a union, started with 4 members, ended up being 13, kind of a coincidence. And the express purpose, again, was to manage trade, settle disputes internally. They forbade alliances, military alliances with anyone outside of the Federation. And they also had different towns and cities, and they also had rural areas. And with the trade, they wanted to manage the cost and benefits between those two different lifestyles. It sounds very familiar with what we're doing today in our country. We talk about the Second Amendment and how people that live in rural areas have different expectations, from people that live in downtown Manhattan. So I thought it was interesting that this, again, is going back, let's see, 13th century. I mean, going back like 500 years plus, people were already dealing with these questions. This particular form of government lasts about 500 years. The French destroyed it back right before 1800. And if you read, and I just did a little bit of reading on it, some of the things I found interesting is the historians that talk about why it failed. They talk about the population was too diverse. And these are historians, these are contemporaneous to the time, not people today. It was too diverse. They had a lot of Protestants and Catholics, right? Now, today, that's hilarious. They're both Christian religions. They have a lot in common. Our diversity is a lot more diverse societal wise, than it was then. And they couldn't get it to work for more than 500 years. They considered themselves too diverse.
If I may interject, I think like all of the big, ruled the world, like the Carthaginians in Rome. I think they only lasted like 300. I think the most was like Rome at 300 years. So
right, as a republic.
Yeah, this is actually technically one of the more successful ruling groups.
Yeah. No, I was surprised how long it lasted. Now, it was in a lot of different forms, but still 500 years, not a bad run. I mean, we're coming up on 250. So I put these maps on here more, again, don't worry about looking at every individual little, and you need like a magnifying glass to see this, but can you guys see my mouse down here? So these are the Swiss cantons.
I don't see America on there.
No, yeah, I mean, Yeah, this was no one knew. Actually, no, America was discovered in
America.
1700. So this
Yeah,
is
I think we were around already. at
we
that
were around. So this is 1700. This is a snapshot. So you've got Poland and Lithuania, which is fantastic. Of course, France is a huge
I'm gonna
power.
argue that one.
Well, I'm Lithuanian, so I'm okay with that. You know, down here you have the Swiss cantons. This is the area we're talking about. This is where those 13 members were,
Okay.
and this is where they existed. Now, 100 years later, after this, and I'll keep my mouse there, it's France. You know, I mean, it's shaded a little different, but it's under the control of France at that time. And again, if you go back, and this is in 100 years, just in general, I'm not just talking about anything specific here besides Switzerland, but look in 100 years how much the political lines change in Europe. You know, and again, this has been going on for time, forever. I mean, Europe is if you look at a map of Europe that changes like every 10 years, you know, you're going to have a seizure. So if we jump to present day, this is where we are now. Again, back to 200 years ago, now, you know. I'm just saying that it's the fly on the tree. We tend to look at things because we only live for, you know, 150 years or so, you know, if we get our head in a jar. So we don't, our perception is that things are the same, that they're static. And I'm saying this is in a span of 200 or 300 years. That's a lot of death and fighting, you know, how much that changes. So anyway, for whatever that's worth, let me jump back out of here.
You know, a lot of what you're talking about, you know, we were all familiar with the science fiction is the precursor to science fact, and a lot of this falls in line with a lot of the Star Trek stuff of one world. They didn't call it New World Order. I think they called it One World Order, which is, you know, same thing, different name. And they painted it as this beautiful thing. And honestly, I mean, so when I was reading your article, the thing that for some reason came to my mind is, why do we have world leaders, but then we have these other guys that do all our dealings with other countries, like ambassadors? I feel like it would be far more fruitful to have the world leaders meet in an area and hash things out rather than go through this proxy. Does that make any sense? Or
I mean, I think it's just a matter of scale. So diplomacy, you know, diplomats and
but the
ambassadors,
best diplomat that you would have is your world leader.
right? But the thing about having an ambassador is they're, you know, an ambassador isn't just saying what they feel like. Like they're there to carry out the policy of the leader. And one, they say, you know, it's practicality. You can't have the president of a country flying all over the place, meeting people all the time because they got to take care of domestic things.
No, but like an annual
Well, they do the G8
meeting of the
G7
actual leaders of the country.
Yeah, no, they do
Okay,
that.
fair enough.
They once in a
Okay.
while. But I think the other thing is having an ambassador also gives them plausible deniability and a second bite of the apple. So, you know, if Michael's the ambassador and Jason is the president, and I go over and I put my foot in my mouth, Jason be like, yeah, we just fired that guy. We're going to send you Jack. You know, he's a lot smarter. He won't do that.
Dictator.
Whatever. Yeah.
I don't know about that either.
But that's a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
don't know about that either.
that's a lot of the reason too. But
Jack makes a lot of bad decisions.
it's just an example. And then I'll jump off my intro here in a second, but to bring it home, the thing, if you read through that article, and I'll post it with this, and I can also share screen if we want to go through some of it if you guys want to. But when I read through that, it all sounds great about bringing, you know, having a federal system where each country has representatives in a world government that both represent, excuse me, their individual communities and then also their country on a world stage, which people say, well, how about the UN? The UN's not like that. The UN only has representatives of the country, doesn't have representatives of, different areas within the country. In our country, our form of federalism, we have a bicameral legislature. So we have the Senate that represents the states, and we have the House of Representatives that represents the people, supposedly, when it all works properly. And so this guy, John, was Vlasto, what's that guy's name? John something, John Vlasto. In his writings and in the World Federalism movement, in their page, they're making the argument that this is a necessity so that we as humans, as humanity, can deal with problems moving into the future together and solve them. And again, I'm very when I hear leaders talk about solving problems, sounds good, but I always want to know what's the problem we're solving, and what if we didn't solve it? Would that affect me? The big umbrella that a lot of this globalism stuff is happening under, the reason is climate emergency, environmentalism, climate change. This is the thing that is causing the necessity of why we need to all get together into like one world government. That's not me saying it. This is like in the top 1, 2 reasons they put forth. And it got me thinking, I'm like, so, okay, whatever your views are on climate change, on the industry of environmentalism, whether you're a true believer or skeptic, I'm just wondering, like, is that the only reason? In other words, is it a pretext or is it a reason, right? Because I'm always suspect of centralizing power at all. But again, what if Godzilla comes out of the ocean? I don't want to be like, I want everyone working together. Like you said, Zeus, Independence Day. I like that idea. And I'm not such a Luddite where I'm like, well, I want it to work in the United States, but doing it on a global scale, that's ridiculous. You know what I mean? It's sort of like,
Well,
I've got my family farm, but the idea of having a
just
big
seems like
farm, that's stupid. I'm like, so I don't want to be a small thinker. If the idea works in the United States, why not take that model and make it like, what's the drawbacks? Anyway,
Worked.
Well,
yeah, if it worked. Yes, no, that's a great point.
Well, to me, it just seems like an extension of the problems we're already having, only on a global scale. Like you're still going to have groups that don't want to play ball. They'll just have larger representation. And the corruption could explode. Again, it's absolute. What is it? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. We're moving towards absolute power if we go that route.
But is there a benefit?
I mean, on paper,
I don't know.
listen, on paper, communism and socialism sound good. Like, everybody's equal, blah, 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 utopia, blah, blah, blah. And this sounds great on paper. And again, it is we agreed that form of government was one of the longer standing ones that there was. So there is some credibility to the idea, but I think that at that time you didn't have the access to information, you didn't have deep fakes, you didn't have a lot of things that we have now that make it a lot harder to rule people by them just taking your word on things.
Well, so what he's talking about isn't necessarily ruling people. What the thing that I found interesting was he's talking about a true federalist world government where there is representation, where instead of the United States being the federal government, the United States would be like your state government. And then the world government would be like the United States government. Like, in other words, you're just scaling up the idea.
so would there be like a world president?
I guess, yeah.
Well, I would have totally voted for
No.
Tony Blair back when he was running the show. He was the guy that I used to go, he'd be a great president of the world. Like, he seemed to be pretty decent.
But would it, like, what is, and why I said this was kind of more philosophical than anything, and there's no right or wrong answer. And it's nothing to argue about. It's just a thought experiment. It's like, this gets into like, why are we here? This gets into morality. This gets into, are you just self-interest versus are we here to help our species? Or, do we care about our species? Like, are we like, screw
That's kind of the
humans?
problem. That's
I'm
kind
just
of the
here.
problem is we've shifted from gratitude for things like just being happy that you wake up and are taking an air to entitlement. I'm entitled to be happy. And if I am not made to be happy, then I'm going to stir shit up. And I think that's where a lot of the problem, that's why I'm saying there's an evolution of people that's involved here that we have to consider, is that we have changed since the 1700s. And certainly, we don't have to go out into the field and fucking, what's that, the plowshare. We don't have to do any of that stuff. We just go to the store and get our potatoes. We don't have to grow our potatoes anymore. If we do that, it's a luxury. It's a way that we save money. I just think that although it does sound like on paper, it sounds great. How
So
much
growing, well, let's use a potato analogy. So it's great. There's a huge benefit where I can just go to the store and get potatoes. I don't have to waste my time digging in the ground for potatoes. The downside, and if you watch, I think all of our favorite episodes, the practical prepping episode, what if you can't get your potatoes from the store? In other words, there's a benefit, but it also makes society more brittle and fragile because I don't
Right.
know how to grow potatoes. But anyway, Desiree, you were about to say something. Let's go around and just get initial stuff. You were about to say something too.
I don't think that it would. Okay, a lot of things.
Yeah.
First of all, I think that if this would work, it would already have worked, if that makes any sense. Like, we've already, is it the Paris Climate Summit? What's it called?
Paris Climate Accords, I believe.
Something like that. That's a disaster. I mean, there's no one really participates in it. I mean, I think it's a good thought, but there's not really, like, the participation is really weak. So there's that. Also the United Nations, like, there's a lot of people that aren't in there. And
good point.
Why?
Yeah.
For whatever reason. I mean, they don't want to be.
I think
They're
sovereignty.
pieces of shit. They, for whatever reason, they're not a participant.
Well,
so you have to, those, like, if you look at everyone as like stakeholders, you have to sell this as like all these countries need to buy into this whole new world order or whatever. Like,
and that's where the problem
I don't think that all of them will.
Yeah, they lose their political autonomy.
To a degree. Again, this is the promise, and I'm not saying this is what would happen. The promise, again, and when you're talking federalism, is that there would be a global federal layer of government that would handle planetary issues, but they're not delivering your mail.
If you scale it to a planetary leader, I think that it would be the beginning of the downfall of the Earth.
Yeah, again,
because it would get, the one person would have way too much power over others, and it would just, I don't know. I don't think that would work.
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily have to be one person. It could be a high council of some of like the most powerful armed countries, you know what I mean? Or the ones with the most palatable form of their own government, you know what I mean? Like the one that could embrace this system that you're talking about. And that's what I think the problem is, Mike. In your example, and it flies in the face of like the modern day mantra we hear in this country all the time is diversity is our strength. And as your example points out, it kind of isn't, because the problem is everybody has a diversity of interests and culture and requirements for their own society, and trying to get all those people into the same pool That's the rub. And also what scares me about this, because it on paper, like Zeus said, Mike,
Sounds fantastic.
it does seem like an obviously good idea. Like the planet, there should be a union of leaders that everybody kind of is responsible for things that are better for the planet. But what's the price you pay for that? Like
That's
we're seeing it here already. The reason why on this show we're suspicious of the WHO and the World Economic Forum is because we've heard their plans to save the planet. You will own nothing and you will like it. You will eat bugs. You will live in mega cities, right?
right.
The WHO leader, I forget the guy's name.
Tedros. No.
I think it is
Doucherton.
Douchey Doucherton. Yeah.
no,
No, Klaus.
no,
Klaus
that's
something.
Mike.
Doucherton.
No, Mike,
Oh.
Mike. The World Economic Forum is Klaus Schwab, but
Klaus Schwab.
the WHO is Tedros. I think you had it
Tedros.
right.
Yeah, Tedros.
And I recently saw a video of him talking about disease X and how we can plan for it better than we did before.
Yeah.
And what he said was the one thing we have to worry about and basically crack down on is misinformation. And you know what? I've seen that movie before,
Mhm.
like quite recently. And the
Yeah.
bottom line is the WHO, they were the ones lying to us. Okay? They were in bed with China. They completely lied about the vaccine and about the efficacy of it and about the lockdowns and how to stop the spread. And a lot of countries like ours bought into their bullshit. And look what happened to the economy. And look what's still happening to people, with this vaccine. And people that didn't even have to take, like children and babies, got injected with this little mystery cocktail.
Yeah.
I don't trust them anymore because all the misinformation, the stuff that they labeled misinformation, it turns out was true. And
Yeah.
so if we're going to have globalist leaders like these people, no thanks. Like I like freedom. I like our country's autonomy. I don't necessarily want to play in the sandbox with China or Russia because I don't really, approve of their forms of government. And
Mhm.
China, as far as the environment goes,
They're 90% of the problem.
they're 90% of the problem. They're not, you know what I mean? Like they have no
They're building
regard.
like 1,000 coal distribute or whatever coal plants.
Right.
Like low. I mean, fuck cows, please, man.
Well, not
Get
right.
off get off the fucking cows are destroying the fucking
Right.
ozone bullshit.
Well,
Kill more, have more steaks. Fuck you.
Not only that, what about like Dodge isn't going to make fuel injected cars anymore?
I know, and that's coming
Right.
back. They're gonna swap that out. Jason,
Yeah.
what do you think, real quick? Just what's your
Oh,
initial?
I'm gonna go. I'll be back.
Oh man.
Yeah. My immediate reaction was highly skeptical. I started looking for my brown coat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't have really even a shred of hope or faith that would ever
Yeah.
work, or even, I mean, unity is a great excuse for domination,
Yeah.
sure. And just to follow up
But-
on what Jack was saying about the WHO, I mean, they have plans. They have plans. They want to do all the things that were already shown not to work. They want mandates. They want to control information, and they want everybody to abide by their rules. And there's just far too much. We can't even get it right here.
Yeah.
And how are they doing
America's-
it with our health? They're threatening our health. You won't be healthy if you don't listen to us. You will die if you don't listen to us.
Yeah.
It's a control tactic that is very effective. If you don't
Who
wear,
are these?
you're gonna die. It's like,
Who are these benevolent, brilliant people who are
oh, Dr. Fauci.
Sufficient information, and they're sufficiently reasonable, they're sufficiently kind, and they're sufficiently wise, and they're sufficiently giving, and they're just they're informed, and they're all, is this AI? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe that's what it
How
is. Maybe if we
how
just
about
turn it
Fauci?
all over to AI. And
Fauci
then-
left Trump and went immediately to Biden. Like, didn't skip a beat. I'm loyal to Biden. It just seamlessly, all of his beliefs and everything suddenly aligned with the opposite of the guy that he was working with before. It's ludicrous.
Ideally, I mean, like I said, to me, I want to believe, right? I'm like Fox Mulder. Like, I want to believe, like, if I
out there.
if I look ahead 10,000 years, right? So the year 12,024, what does the world look like at that point? I mean, in other words, what are we striving to a point where like, obviously I want the United States to be successful. So am I just striving to have the United States be successful and bugger the rest of the world? Or how does that work? Like, where are we going? Like, what's the end game? So when people come up and they say, here's an idea, I mean, I'm not even gonna call it utopian, because this guy, they lay out a lot of practical stuff. But when they start using the reason of environmentalism, that's where I'm like, like, I don't know, is that really the problem it is? And not to get into that subject, but to me, even when you're trying to scale federalism on a geographical area the size of the United States, we're just coming up on 250 years, and we're this close to losing it, right? I mean, again, I'm not getting into current
I
events.
think we've already lost
It's
it.
hard. It is hard to manage everyone's expectations because of this weird thing called human nature, because people are inherently selfish. And I'm not talking about they're assholes. I'm talking at the end of the day,
You
you know,
got to watch out for number one.
you got to watch out for number one. And it concerns me, like when Jack was bringing up the point we talked about earlier, like diversity in the Swiss Republic. You know, contemporaneous historians were like, it was just too many different types of people. That's like, they're all Swiss and they're all Christian, and that was too much, right? And they lasted 500 years. And then you take the United States, now the United States, it kind of is the world in miniature to some degree, in that we're not Japan, you know, we're not all French, we're all different.
Is it really, like, when you look at a city, there's always like a Chinatown, there's, Korean town.
Tribalism. People want to be
So-
with people
so
that
is
are
it-
like them.
Is it really, or is it just a small, a microcosm of the way the world is? We're just separating people, we've got them under our thumb more. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think people, and this guy, and people who are globalists, I think they ignore human nature. I mean, this is the little voice in my head. It's like, it's easy to say, oh, I want this kind of new world order, I want this global federalism. But again, what do you get from it, and what are you giving up? And is it sustainable? Or you can't, we're monkeys, man. We're monkeys that wear shoes. You
With
know what I mean?
guns.
It's like,
With guns.
we're animals. Like, we're not robots. We're not, I don't know if it's doable. And then I'm like, well, then are we cutting ourselves short? I mean, again, I go back and forth like this. I do want to bring up this one thing, and I emailed you guys this, but let me go back to share screen here. Dun, 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 dun. Where's that article? I'll just go to this. Okay. Okay, here we go. This is what I emailed you guys, and I just want to read it. You guys don't have to read it on the screen. This, to me, kind of gives up the whole thing. What would it take for the reforms that you propose to materialize? This is the reporter asking the guy this question. And he says, this decision-making and legitimacy dysfunction goes back to the very origins of the current system, when the winners of the Second World War gave themselves a veto, meaning Soviet Union, China, Britain, France, and the United States all have singular veto power in the UN, just like what happened today with the ceasefire vote for Israel. 13 fours, United States against, and it's dead. It may take a crisis as big as the one that originated the system, meaning the UN, to produce the profound reform it needs. As Milton Friedman noted, who's a genius, what's done in a crisis depends on the plans that are lying around at the time. So part of the World Federation movement's role is to write the plan and keep it alive in the minds of policymakers until the crisis occurs and the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable, which if you follow the Friends of Zeus podcast, that is choreography and not conspiracy. And he has, whether you agree with his take or his solution, you know, and we can rail against it, but it is kind of the, you know, history is won when things go sideways. It's won by people who are prepared for it. You know, like when you look back at the invasion of Iraq, excuse me, after 9/11, 9/11 happened, and about 60 days later, we had a battalion driving 80 miles an hour across the desert towards Baghdad. That didn't happen in 60 days. Those plans we know now, all of that was already laid out for years. There were people lobbying Clinton to go into Iraq and take out Saddam. When Bush came in, all the people behind Bush, the Cheneys of the world, the Karl Roves of the world, they wanted to take Saddam out so bad. And 9/11 was an excuse. We looked at it as the cause. It was the excuse. And this guy's saying the same thing. We need to form this world government and have all the T's crossed and I's dotted so that when something bad happens, it's just ready to go. Because when people are in crisis, they're not looking to have a debate. They're not looking to figure things out. They want Jason to pop up and be like, hey, everyone, come over here. I got the solution. Here, follow me. I've already got it planned. That's what people want. And again, it's not a fear, but I'm like, there's people already out there doing it. We've seen this happen again and again. So there seems to me to be an inevitability to it, which is also disturbing.
It's kind of hard not to, it's kind of hard to have this conversation and avoid climate. I mean, it's the whole thing seems to be predicated on that. Like what exactly are the world threats that cannot be handled? Like, so
Yes.
you have to be taking a stance on climate. You have to view climate as a actual threat for against humanity. And I just don't see that.
No, and I personally do agree with that. Now, are there things that nations can make agreements on regarding the environment but I feel like we're already doing that. I mean, everyone that complains about gas-powered automobiles in our lifetime, I mean, for me, in the 30 years I've been alive, the technology in cars it's not even like they're the same machine. The efficiency, what comes out of that tailpipe is so much cleaner now than it was in 1972. I mean, by factors, not percentage. Yeah, to me, the whole environmental thing, it seems like a way to sell the idea of globalism. I almost feel like, to me, and Jason, I'm kind of with you. It's like I need, like, give me a better reason. Okay, if it's environmentalism, I disagree, we disagree. Let's put that aside. Okay, what's the second and third reason? And I just get crickets at that point. I don't know what the reason is.
What about, but if you think about some of the global policies that we already see being like implemented by the corporations and by certain countries, it's environmental social governance, right? That's what they're grading countries on, is the way that they comply with this. And that's what's being preached to us here in the country. So it's not just environmental policies, it's something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's a form of socialism that almost prepares the world for this new world order, I think, in a sense. And then you see disasters like Sri Lanka. I think it was Sri Lanka we did an episode on that actually got banned, and
Yeah.
it's no longer on YouTube.
Can't watch it.
But it seems like it's, and then I don't know, I kind of wanted to make the point, Mike. You talked about all the preparation and planning that went into the Iraq invasion, right? I mean, after, with the weapons of mass destruction, it seems like I'm hearing a lot of the neocons currently in the government crying havoc for war with Iran. Like, they're already setting that up, and now you have these attacks on US, drones and boats with the Houthis, and the Houthis are backed by Iran. And you kind of wonder if this is more New World Order afoot, you know what I mean? Like, because if there's a major war, there are plans in place for that too,
Yeah.
that are going to hurry this process along.
Yes.
So I wonder, even if these higher ups, these truly powerful people in the WEF, or all the conspiracies about the hidden cabal, right, that runs everything, they may have like these altruistic goals, perhaps, right? Maybe save the world. But it seems like the means that they'll get, the means that they'll use to achieve that globalism aren't necessarily, benign, or looking out for the general. Like, how much do they value human life? You know what I mean? Like, or human freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me a little suspicious and frightened of any, like you said, centralized power on high.
I
Because
mean,
then people are like, we've already talked about possible intents to depopulate, like, is that on the table? Is that going to make the world safer and cleaner if we just kind of maybe, cut the population by a certain percentage? Like, would they lose sleep over that? Who are they? Like,
Yeah.
I don't trust.
they send their children to war all the time. So clearly that is not a major priority in their minds.
It's Bill Gates, he's involved. He's jets around the world solving the world's problems. And I'm asking this honestly, is Bill Gates is he just this loving dude that is altruistic and trying to help humanity?
Yeah, philanthropist.
Philanthropist? I mean, I'd like to think so, but the thing is,
I don't.
people that get to a certain point, at least in my and I'm talking about, like, when I lived in Baltimore, I met the mayor a few times, and this is a small scale, right? He just had politician coming out of his pores everywhere. Like, I didn't believe him, and he lived like 6 blocks from me, and he was just the mayor of my little town. And I'm like, to get to that point, you're not altruistic. You are the base example of human nature, of being in it for yourself to achieve, to get to that point. And so to have these people turn around and then start pulling at my heartstrings about a common good, I'm just very sus about that, man.
Never. Okay, first of all, never use the term sus again, or I will punch you in your fucking skull.
You got to know who I hang out with, man.
Yeah,
Come on, man. Sus is fire.
rise above it.
Yeah.
Rise above it, brother.
Okay.
Slay
So
on.
here's what I think. We want to talk choreography. This is probably what is going to happen to a degree. And shit is so bad now that they don't have to make things much better for us to kind of back off and not be as, angry as hornets with the nest being poked. I think what we're going to see is like a 10, 15 year period of, and again, this is in the contrast of the way the world is right now, of relative peace and calm and all that. And then they'll come back to it and will be more trusting and forgiving of some mistakes. And then they're going to lay the hammer down. Because in the grand scheme of things, 10, 15 years really isn't that much. That's where I see it going. Again, that's the choreography, is that this talk is coming out now. And even we're talking about centralized government. What is the thing that we're bitching about in the United States all the time? So,
yeah.
but here we're talking about it calmly and could be good. So, you know, maybe they're introducing it in a grand scale so that it's painting with broad strokes and we can feel better about it and all warm and fuzzy and everybody will get along. And then the hammer's going to get laid down and we're going to be Hunger Games with 13 districts, you know? And
well, and also at a certain point, it gets to be a little much. I mean, I know, you know, in my house, you know, there are literally times.
it's not your house, though. It's a community of people living in a small building.
It's it's all my followers.
Commune.
Yeah. I stopped working years ago, but so anyway, but I'm saying there's stuff that you wake up in the morning, you got to go take a piss, you're hungry, so you make some eggs, you have to make a living, so you go to work, your car needs teeth. Oh yeah, you brush your teeth.
Gross, Mike.
You got to get gas in your
shower.
car. I mean, there's things like your area of concern is like right here. And what people who are globalists are asking is for my area of concern to just go out to places that are abstract. I can't even fathom how wide that is. I know, again, in my house, there's times, usually towards the end of the week or whatever, my wife and I are talking, da-da-da-da-da, this, and this, you know, Zeus is, you know, such a pain in the ass. And, like, he's always, like, sleeping in our backyard and stuff. He doesn't think we see him back there. Anyway, all this stuff we start stressing about. and you turn on the news and it's like stress. There's literally times where we're like, we just cut all any inputs from the world. Like,
we're being
turn the TV off, turn off the radio. Let's do a puzzle. Let's play Legos, because it's too much. And so I'm wondering if human nature just, like, is that just wired into us? Like, we're not meant to be like concerning our daily lives with things that are that vast. You know, I don't know.
Well, I mean, look at like the 1800s. It was much more broadly, how do I put it? People weren't in contact with the world on the level that we are now. This is why I say that there's a socially evolutionary part to this that we have to look at as well. We're different. Again, less gratitude, more entitlement. We now know what is out there and what we can achieve, and it affects how we look at things. I honestly, if I could pick a time if I could go back to a certain time in history, it would probably be the 1800s, where yes, you had people that were lynching people and doing awful things, but it was in a microcosm, and they.
So just to be clear, you want to go back to the 1800s because there was lynching.
Yeah, we're gonna clip that out, put that right at the beginning.
No, but you understand my point, is that there was a lot more autonomy in smaller groups that were separated from you know, the world. You didn't. Again, I think we're being overstimulated with purpose.
Yes.
We think about, about everything.
Look, if you have 100-acre farm and you don't own a television and you don't have the internet, that 100-acre farm, the Amish, that 100-acre farm, that's your world, man. I mean, there's a stream going through it. There's animals that go through that you shoot every season, and you call some of them out, and you grow stuff or whatever, and you live your life. The moment you start finding out about all this other stuff, now your 100-acre farm starts to feel smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. I mean, when I think of one world,
breaking Amish.
And then yes. When I think of like one world
Nice,
government, I'm
Jeff.
like, am I going to be voting whether like, does Lan does he owe Chan some money for their rice field or something? Like I don't even live there, right? I'm not in Vietnam. Like why do I have any input into what's going on over there
Well,
at all? And to me, it almost seems arrogant, which also, in my experience, matches what people who are globalists are, this arrogance, the Bill Gates,
we know
where
better
they,
than
where they want to, I don't want to control anybody else. I just want to be on my little 100-acre
well,
farm, man.
and an argument to what Jack was saying, and I'm not arguing with Jack, but this whole like we need a big culling, we need to get rid of all these people. There are literally groups of people in, say, the jungles in South America that have not made contact with
Mhm.
the outside world yet. So don't tell me that we don't have room, that we can't feed people. There are literally people we haven't met yet. There are literally still animals that
Wait,
we.
why would that be arguing with me? I don't
I'm not
disagree.
arguing with you. What I'm saying is that their argument of we've got to get rid of all the people because we can't support them is nonsense. There's places in the world
Oh,
we haven't even explored yet. We find new animals all the time on an island that was, I mean, there is plenty more there. We haven't even
Yeah, I
considered
wouldn't
like
argue with
building
that.
cities on the water, or there's a lot of things that we still have that we can do. And it does not have anything to do with our population. To say that our population is too big, I don't necessarily agree with that.
No, I don't agree with it either. I'm saying what
No, I
they
wasn't
think.
arguing with you. I'm saying that their
Yeah,
argument for these things is fucking nonsense.
it is nonsense.
It,
Of
I
course it
mean,
is.
I can go out my door and look at 20, 30 acres of woods. There is still space, and that's, I mean, that's just my little Annandale
Mhm.
portion, which is, a pretty well populated city, and there's still more space. So I think it's the they again, but it's now it's a bigger, broader they with federalism. That they just want to build fears of things that aren't happening. Again, like Mike said, it's choreography. They know we're gonna freak out about shit, so why not plan the dance?
Well, Zeus, I'm not saying it. It is, what's this guy's name again? John Vlasto of the World Federalism movement that says
Yeah.
that.
Well, no, but also, I think you and Mike, you and Jason hit on it. One of the things that's alarming is like the idea that the powers that, whether we know about them or not, or whether a guy like Bill Gates is in on this little centralized, let's say the WEF or whatever this acronym is, the World Federalist Movement,
Mhm.
whoever, I don't like the fact that there's plans, like just the word plans. Like what does that entail? Because like you bring up this point that we all have autonomy and we all have our daily problems, right? Like I want food, I want shelter, I want my kids to be safe, all that stuff. Everybody's so individual. But at the same time, we've seen throughout history and even in this country recently with COVID, how a centralized government can herd the cattle, herd the sheep, get everybody in line to do the same thing to serve the greater good. Like that can be done by a centralized government with armed forces. That's the threat, and that's what it takes sometimes to get the people to do what needs to be done. And so the idea frightens me. I think it flies in the face
Terrifying.
it flies in the face of freedoms that we value, because at the end of the day, if they want you to do something you don't want to do, like let's say you have the 100-acre farm, well, we need to take 70 acres because we need it for this, and you may not like that, like you worked hard to have that and you want to have it for your children. No, sir, there are no more property rights because it's not for the greater good right now. Like
Yeah, did you
we need the property to enact whatever the plan is, right? What's the
Why are you
plan?
being selfish? Yeah.
Right.
Did you hear this thing about, I don't know who he is, but this guy in Canada, he's talking about how parents they don't have rights over their children. And that essentially children have their own rights. It was all around like
Oh, that's the whole thing going on with the trans.
Yeah, and I just found that appalling that we as parents, we don't look at our children as our possessions. We look at them as our charges. We are here to, at best, my argument for being a good parent is just make them a little better than you. But that is not an ownership thing. That is a lift them up rather than push them down kind of thing. It's not a I own you thing. It's a I want you to prosper thing. And the way that I do that is by offering you my suggestions. And if you don't agree, all right, I'm gonna take the leadership role here, and we'll revisit this later. But
Well,
I found that
Yeah.
very alarming, and it
Well,
falls
no,
in line with
no,
all
there are
this.
states where people are already losing custody of their kids over the transition issue. There are states also where if your kid runs away because mom and dad don't believe I'm a boy like I say I am, then somebody else, an adult, a grown-ass adult with no ties to the child, can bring the child to a foster home and report it to the state's child and family services. And I think it's maybe Oregon and maybe now California. And they'll basically say, okay, well, we have your kid now.
yeah.
Your kid's no longer your kid because you fought them on the transition treatment, which is now being validated by the American medical community.
And
So
there's another thing going on right now where they're talking about, like, if your kid commits a crime,
that
now
happened.
the parent can be held responsible and go to jail. And
That just
but
happened. That just
but
happened.
but you can't take ownership of your kid and raise them in a way, guide them. It's a complete paradox.
Right.
It's you're responsible for whatever they do wrong, but you can't guide them in a way that
Yeah,
teaches them
but
to do wrong.
no, Zeus, that could be its own show. Like
Yeah,
I don't know how we got on that.
But what if like and Jason or Desiree, I mean, chime in. If you had to play devil's advocate, like if you believed this and you had to sell it, can you think of any way to sell it? Like how would you spin it? I mean, I know Jason, you said, yeah, you're not, but if you were trying to sell it, how would you sell it? And same for you, Desiree. I mean, that's why I think they came up with the environmentalism thing. Because it's
Yes, yeah, that's definitely the intro.
It's a common fabricated problem.
The picture that you showed was very appropriate of from the Apollo mission, because apparently when astronauts go into space and actually see the world, it's fairly pretty common for them to report a profound spiritual transformation, and it's hard for them to see the world as anything but one world when they come back.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely an ideal there.
Yeah.
And you can appeal to Star Trek and pop culture and striving towards the future. And we've all been inundated with climate change propaganda for so long that I mean everybody's on board that, okay, there's certainly I think almost anyone's like, yeah, we should probably be doing something. We should be changing something. So almost everybody agrees that it's just what is the nature and extent of that something. So
Yeah.
it's hard to try to
Just-
sell it. Yeah.
I know. I mean, I'm just saying to be devil's. I mean, we're kind of smart. I mean, I'm trying to think like, why do they
Well, I
only
mean-
stick the environmental part? Like, is there another? And I don't know that there is.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, there is. It's Mike, it's right there in the ESG score. It's also the social governance. It's also diversity is our strength. Keep hammering home that message. That's
Yeah.
it, because then you'll think that a global federalist government could actually accomplish something and work. because it's already being preached to you that, you know, that things should change in that direction, and then we'd be one world unified.
And what if we're
And
wrong?
we're already seeing how that backfires, you know what I mean, in this
Yeah.
country with the DEI. It's not about leveling the playing field, it's about flipping the script.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we see it in this country, at least the way it's you know, coming to fruition, like
And
everything that's being exposed.
and the thing is, it's like, again, it's weird. I like getting older because although physically things start going a little sideways,
Yeah, it sucks.
I wouldn't
Worse
trade it.
erections?
I wouldn't trade it for the wisdom. I mean, I've told this story. I probably told it on this podcast. If I haven't, it's about time. But when I was 23 years old, I
If
bought
it's
a
about a
house.
movie theater, I'm gonna lose my.
No, it's not about a movie theater. I bought this house, and the people that lived across the street, it was an older couple. They were in their like 80s. They had lived there since like the 40s. Okay, this is a Baltimore City, and I had my little. I was a cool dude, so I had a little black Honda Del Sol at the time, VTEC. It's like very sweet. But anyway,
Nice
I was
ride.
changing the oil because that's what way in the past when the dinosaurs were
What
here,
cool dudes
people
did.
used to change their own oil. I'm sorry.
That's what cool dudes did.
That's what cool dudes did. And so I'm in the driveway, I change the oil, and I got the little thing with the oil in it, and it's sitting there. And this guy's name, his name was Mr. Man. God bless him.
Mr.
Died-
Man. To have
yeah,
two ends.
2 ends. And he was a
Good.
welder that worked in a machine shop for like the city for his whole career. Anyway, he comes over and he had glasses that were like Coke bottle glasses. Always wore like khakis with a t-shirt. I don't think I ever saw him in anything else. Nicest dude in the world. What are you doing? He used to call me hard work. And he was like, are you working hard or are you hardly working? That's what he used to say. Anyway, so he comes over and I'm like, hey, Mr. Man, do you know any place I can take this oil, or do they just pick it up? Like, can I put it out in the trash or something? He's like, and in front of my house was a storm drain, like right in
I
front of my
was
house.
just gonna say that.
And he's
Dump it
like,
down the drain.
just put it down the drain. And I'm like, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. He's like, that's what I do. And he's been there since the 40s. Okay. And I'm like,
Mhm.
you just,
Like you're the reason why they have those commercials with the ducks
you
and
put the oil?
the Dawn dish soap.
This is the coup de grace. I'm like, you put your oil down the storm drain? He's like, everybody did. I'm like, oh my God. So
But you know,
I'm saying that's the way it used to be.
Right.
there's something to
That
that.
there's been improvement, is what I'm trying to tell our younger viewers. It's
Mhm.
not,
But-
it's not, you're not you're not being born into this world that's the road warrior. Like, we have made progress, right? It's a
But
matter of degree to
even
some
that,
extent.
how pompous are we to think that us pouring oil down a storm drain once, twice, our whole lives is really going to have that great of an effect on the environment? Now, an oil
I mean, if
rig,
everybody did it,
Everyone did it, dude. And I lived on a populous street.
but if an oil rig goes off on the coast of fucking Washington, yeah, that's a problem. But 75% of the earth is water.
Water. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to sink to the bottom. It's going to reintegrate itself into things. Yes, there will be
it's gonna
death.
make
but
the ducks dirty.
It's gonna make the ducks dirty.
don't even get me started on the fucking paper straws and turtles bullshit.
Well, the
Fuck
ducks
that.
get dirty.
Fucking turtles should get thumbs so they can pull it out themselves. I don't know, but fucking yeah,
Well,
I
not
think
to,
we get a little too. I think we get a little too big for our britches when we. I mean, I'm not gonna pour my oil down the drain, but
it seems it's insane. Like, I'm no environment. I mean, at that time I was not, but in a million
You're
years I
right.
would never think to do that, you know?
Yeah, but the question is, do they still do that in places like China, India?
Probably.
You know
they
what I
still do it
mean?
in places like Annandale.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Zeus does it right there in Fairfax.
Fuck
Then he
that! I don't
gets out
change
of
my
there.
oil. I let the little people do that for me.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah. Who changes their oil anymore?
Yeah, I
well,
don't change my own oil.
just
Never.
to bring it back to the
What peasant
beginning.
do you think I am?
To bring it back to the beginning, and again, I'm cool. We can keep talking or we can wrap it up, but the whole point of this exercise is when again, to make it a little political, bring it back to our situation, it is difficult to have a political conversation, a conversation about values, conversation about society and culture, when you have incredibly different views on this topic with the person that you're having the conversation with. My gut feeling, and I haven't tested this, but my gut feeling is people that are more leftist, I'm not saying liberal, leftist, progressive, they are all in on this,
Mhm.
you know, and I again, if I'm being devil's advocate, I could sell this. Like
Yeah.
if given enough
It sounds
time,
great.
I could come up with a compelling argument for this. But in my heart, I disagree with it. And so when you start having conversations with people politically about everyday things that we're dealing with now, and their worldview is that we have a way to better humanity and to make the world not even utopia, but we should all be working together collectively. And just us five talking about this right now, we're kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that kind of informs all of these other
Right.
political
Beliefs.
conversations that we're
Right.
having.
If,
And we
if I
never
may,
talk about it, but they're like lava under the surface,
Well,
you know?
and also it's funny you say that because and I hate to put words in his mouth, but you know, we have a very liberal, progressive, I would say lefty
That's
friend named Tor, who's
that's
been
why
on
I
the
wanted him on
podcast.
here. Yeah.
And Mike and Tor will, you know, Tor, if you watch this, you'll know that we reached out to you because Mike wanted you to come on.
Yeah.
And I know Tor's not here, but when we did that episode recently, the Ask Not episode about what do you want from your government? Like, what do you envision? I remember Tor said, and it was like we already referenced the idea here. He said, I want what they have in Star Trek, essentially, like
The Federation.
a world federation. And that's really what this is. And so he kind of just threw it out there.
Yeah.
He said, that's what I want. And so, like, just to make your point, Mike, that people that have those political viewpoints are probably on board with this idea. And maybe we're the ones who are, you know, wrong.
wrong.
You
Yeah,
know?
Yeah.
I know. I was thinking that earlier. What if we're the wrong ones? What if we're the band of rebels that are going to cause all this shit when everything was actually going to get better? What if we're wrong? You know, it's
That's what
something.
I'm saying. I mean, I'm just saying I have too many quote unquote political disagreements with people who I have a huge amount of admiration for intellectually and
Yeah.
everything else. And that's why I'm just been trying to crack that code, because when you're talking about taxes, aid to Ukraine, the abortion issue, immigration, whenever you're talking about all that stuff, this view of the world and of humanity is the river that runs under all of that stuff.
Yep.
And when people butt heads, you're not, I'm not going to be persuaded off of this point. And I fear they're not either, you know?
Right.
So,
It is what it
Mike,
is. In other words,
Yeah,
it's really about who wins, you
I
know?
guess.
history is
And
written by the victors.
well, and also though, if you tie this back to George H.W. and the New World Order and the plotting that went into the Iraq invasion and what might happen next, right? You look at it, it kind of also explains why, like, we talk every week about what our own government is doing to individual liberty and to the American traditional values of freedom, individualism, etc., constitutionalism. It kind of makes sense that they would be terrified of a guy like Trump and a populist movement. You know what I mean? If they're part already of this,
Yes. It
if
may,
they're already part of this planning, if they're part of a new world order, this bigger picture that we always ask, What are the corporations in this? Why are they in on this? Like, we always ask these questions, and maybe it's because our own government is part of this globalist plan
And-
already.
And it would
Maybe.
explain how the hate comes back, right? Because look, people, here's what I don't believe. I don't think, because some of them are friends of mine and people I love, I don't think people who are progressive and leftists are horrible people and hate
No.
people, because that's too easy. It's like they actually believe it. Like, I know people who they heartfelt believe it, and I heartfelt
Mhm.
believe what I believe. So I don't know how you bridge that. You know,
Mhm.
I don't know, because it comes down to how you view the world, how you view humanity, and your
Mhm.
place in humanity and in the world. And if you're thinking like we can we can fix all this stuff, and then you have someone like me saying like, consent of the governed, and I don't want to, you're like, you're being an asshole. You're a Luddite. You're
Right.
preventing us from becoming our perfect selves,
Yeah.
you know?
Right, but that's just it, because they have this view of the world where this utopia is perfect and it's going to work like a charm this time.
Right.
And
This time.
it just doesn't. I mean, it doesn't. And that's the problem. You're the problem, Mike. It's people that actually aren't on board with this wave.
Right.
So now we're Nazis and we're racists
It
and
explains a lot of the
Oh,
passion.
that's the part you have to save for the beginning of the.
I'm just saying it explains the passion.
it does. It really
Listen,
does. Hey, Mike, you finally cracked the code. Episode 155.
Took 155 episodes.
now we got it. Hey, Mike,
Now we can.
I gotta mention.
Show's over.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been looking at this guy behind you, and I'm assuming that's the guy that wrote the. Yeah, that dude is a fucking serial killer.
No, that's Alexei Navalny. That's the guy that
Yeah.
Putin just took out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He was a serial killer.
No, he's not a serial killer. He was the resistance.
He's got black eyes, like doll's eyes.
This guy, listen, man, this dude
Oh.
has been against Putin for years,
Be right
and
back.
he was
Listen,
poisoned. He was poisoned by Russian agents in Germany, and they saved
And
his
left
life
in his
barely. Barely
he's
saved his
like
life.
sleeping with newspaper over him to keep himself warm. He's up in Siberia.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
I'm familiar with the story.
now he's dead. But I'm saying when he got better, it
No,
took
he
him like a
reached-
year and a half to recover. And as soon as he was able, you know what he did? He got on a plane, he went back to Russia, and he started holding protests and things like that.
Got
And
him
so they
about it.
sentenced him to like 3 years in prison at Polar Wolf, which is about 1,200 miles northwest of Moscow, up in the Arctic.
You think it's
And
cold?
what?
You think it's cold there?
It's cold. And while he was there, they tacked on another 19 years. And then on last Thursday, I think, he was in court. He looked totally healthy. He was laughing and joking. And the next day, he was dead. And they say he just died. He just died.
I think it's because he was a serial
They
killer.
haven't turned his body over to his family. This was just this past weekend. And there were protests in all the cities in Russia. People
How
like
did
who
they
support
know?
Navalny. Yeah.
How did they know he died of poison falling from the building?
Oh, well, he didn't. The word on the street is he just fell over while he was walking and had a seizure.
Well,
But the
that's
people who were protesting, this is just this past weekend. You know what the Soviet, or what the not Soviet, what Putin's goons did? They arrested all those people, hundreds of them, put them
wow.
in
It
jail.
almost sounds like they were insurrectionists.
You know who would support one world government? I'm pretty sure Putin.
Yeah,
I think he's on board.
I think he would be on board.
I think he'd want to be president of that one world government. But I've said it before, I don't like, obviously, who would like Putin? But man, I don't think he's crazy. I think he's fucking determined. And that is far scarier to me than crazy. That guy, he doesn't look crazy. He looks like he's got
He has no regard for human life, man.
Right.
And that's frightening.
Yeah.
Well, I think Jack's back, unless Desiree and Jason have something, but I think Jack's back in time to take us home.
If you,
Yep.
I guess we have been on for a while. And we've solved the mystery of this entire show. So I think it's time to wrap things up, mate. What do you
All
guys
right.
think?
Well, take care,
New
everybody.
World Order.
New World Order.